guys, it's Jess and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. Today I'm going to be doing my reading wrap up for the month of June, and I had a mixed reading month in June. Some books I really loved, and then some books just fell way flat for me. So without further ado, let's just jump straight in. The first book that I read this month was The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, and I'm gonna open by saying that I did not enjoy Ruth Ware's debut novel In a Dark Dark Wood. It just wasn't my cup of tea at all, and I wasn't planning on picking this up. Then I saw people say that it was so much better than her debut novel, and I was in the mood for a thriller, so I decided to give it a go. So as I said, this is a thriller. The premise is that we have a young journalist called Lo Blacklock who is given the opportunity of a lifetime when she is invited to go on a press trip on a luxury boutique cruise that goes up to the Northern Lights, and it's kind of a first of its kind sort of trip, and there's only a very small and select group of people who are considered experts in the travel industry who are invited to go along. And within a day of Lo being on this boat, she believes that she sees a body being thrown overboard, but when she brings it to the attention of security, she's basically told that there is no body missing, there are no members of staff unaccounted for, there are no guests unaccounted for. And from there, Lo kind of tries to get to the bottom of what has really gone on and what she has seen. This book missed the mark for me in a number of ways. The first one is that Lo is an unreliable narrator, and I just don't think that I get on with books with unreliable narrators in them. I've read a couple now, I've never really massively enjoyed them. We know from the very beginning that Lo suffers with anxiety and is on anxiety medication, and Ruth Ware uses this to plant doubt into the minds of everybody that Lo speaks to, which just didn't sit right with me at all. I know that people don't necessarily understand mental health, but I just didn't like how, because Lo was on medication for her anxiety, that immediately made her balmy basically and unreliable. I also felt that this was very much a rip-off of The Girl on the Train, with an unreliable narrator who sees something through a window, and you've just replaced anxiety medication for alcohol and a boat for a train, and it just didn't feel right. I mean, it does say on the front Agatha Christie meets the girl on the train, but there was very little Agatha Christie-ness in this for me. The mystery wasn't really a mystery, and that was the other thing that I disliked. I had solved the mystery by about 20 or 30 pages in. It just wasn't clever at all for me. I just could see it coming a mile off. It was a really obvious solution, and you might ask why I carried on reading this book if I disliked it so much, and the honest answer is that I find it really hard to DNF books. I'm always willing to give them a chance, especially thrillers where you never know what's going to come at the end. There could be a massive twist that you just didn't see coming at all. So I think overall Ruth Ware is just not an author for me. I think maybe if you like fast-paced thrillers, if you really enjoyed The Girl on the Train, if you really enjoyed Ruth Ware's first novel, then you will probably love this. But for me, I just don't seem to get on with her style of storytelling, so I'm not sure that I will pick up another one of her books, unfortunately. Then next I picked up The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan. This is a contemporary fiction novel with a little bit of a fantastical element thrown in. It's about a gentleman, an older gentleman called Anthony Perdue, who has spent his whole life collecting and cataloguing lost things, and when he passes away, he leaves his house to his assistant Laura on the basis that she tries to reunite these lost items with their previous owners. So we're talking about literally all kinds of things: a button, a puzzle piece, so much. And what Anthony had done was pick each thing up and make a little tag of exactly where he found it, when he found it, where he was, and so on and so on. And this was such a charming story. I absolutely flew through it. Laura's story kind of parallels the whole idea of lost things, because in this story she very much finds herself. There is a little bit of romance Interspaced within the present day story, there are also the stories of some of the lost things that Anthony found, so going back, and there is also a more historical story that runs parallel to the present day as well. So there's a whole lot going on in this very, very short book, and I just thought that it was a really, really charming, whimsical, lovely read. I really, really enjoyed it. I did think it was perhaps a little bit tropey in places, but just if you want a fluffy, easy, heartwarming read for the summer, or just for any time really, then I would definitely recommend this because I really, really enjoyed it. Next, I picked up The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and I had mixed feelings going into this book because I have seen people compare and contrast The Night Circus to Caraval, and I read Caraval and really enjoyed it early in the year, but having now read The Night Circus, other than both books having a circus type setting, I don't really see the similarities, and I don't feel like they are two books which could be held up next to each other and compared, because they are just very, very different. Where Caraval is a fun and fast-paced read, The Night Circus is something altogether different. Yes, the circus is a part of this book, but the circus is not the heart of this book. It's just the place where the story tends to take place. And this is very much a slow burner. If you don't like slow moving stories, then you're definitely not going to enjoy this. But for me, it took me a while to read it. I only managed to read 4 books this month, and this book is the main reason why, because it just took me quite a while to get through it. It's very wordy, there's quite rich prose. It's very elegant, but it's also quite flowery, and it does take a bit of time to kind of get through it and get into it. It's also told from an omniscient point of view, which is something that I'm not hugely familiar with. I'm not always a fan of, and I find myself often quite disconnected from the characters, but I didn't feel like that in this book actually. I think that Erin Morgenstern did a really good job of making me feel a connection to the characters. So the basic premise of this book is that we have 2 magicians who are being pitted against one another in a competition. They don't know who their opponent is. The venue is the circus. They don't know why they are a part of this competition, and when I say competition, it's not like this fierce battle. It's much more subtle than that. It's basically creating things within the circus setting, and it's a look at how magic has an impact on the people around them and how they control the elements and all. It's really, really difficult to explain, and that's partly because there's just so much that goes on in this book. The circus setting I really, really enjoyed. It's not your typical circus setting, but it is still very magical. It's still very whimsical. I thought that the story was very, very elegant and descriptive and magical, and I just really, really enjoyed it. It is, as I said before, a slow story, and if you're not a fan of those, if you're looking for something more action-packed, then this is probably not going to tick the boxes for you, but I really, really enjoyed it. I thought that it was really clever. I thought that it was really interesting. I just loved being a part of this black and white circus of dreams. I just thought that it was fantastic. So a big thumbs up from me, but I can see how it wouldn't be for everyone, but I personally really enjoyed it. The next book that I picked up was the Bookish Mama's Choice for June, and that was Close to Home by Cara Hunter. This is a thriller. It's the first book in a new detective thriller series, and I again have mixed feelings about this book. The premise is of a young 8-year-old girl who is abducted from a family party, and we meet the team of police officers and detectives who are investigating this crime, and as they begin to try and unravel the mystery of what happened, you begin to see that things aren't quite what they seem, that the family that this little girl was a part of is quite dysfunctional and has a lot of its own issues and a lot of its own problems, and there are many, many things going on under the surface that we don't necessarily see at the beginning. And I enjoyed that for what it was, because it kept you guessing about who it might be that had abducted this little girl. The main kind of emphasis behind this is that in cases of child abduction, 9 times out of 10 the person doing the abduction is someone that the child knows, and so we meet a lot of characters in this little girl's life whom she might have been abducted by, and you are kept guessing for a large portion of the book. The thing that I disliked, and it's not a massive spoiler because I'm not going to tell you what it is that happens at the end, but in the epilogue there is a big twist, and so the story has finished, and then you get a chapter at the end where basically everything that you've been told up to that point is incorrect. And I really didn't like that. There were no clues in the actual bulk of the story to suggest that this twist was coming, so I feel like even if I reread it, there's no sign that this was there, and I don't like that. I like my thrillers to be clever. I like twists where you get to the end and it's revealed and then everything kind of suddenly falls into place for you and you think, of course that's what happened, of course that's, you know, there were signs all along and I just didn't see them because of misdirection or whatever. But that isn't what happens in this book. I'm fairly certain that there are no clues that the outcome is going to be what it is, and I just thought that it was a bit convenient for the author to do that. I mean, overall it was a very fast-paced, very easy read. You hit the ground running. The author doesn't let up for air. It's very fast-paced, and I think I will pick up the next book in the series. I enjoyed that you got some backstory from the detective, particularly the main detective, Adam Fawley. You get an insight into his personal life and the fact that he is dealing with his own tragedies. I can see the relationships between the different team of police officers developing as the series goes on, so I'm curious to pick up the next one. I just wasn't a massive fan of the ending. It felt awfully convenient, but it also came out of the blue, and I'm not a huge fan of that type of ending. So yeah, I think if you like fast-paced thrillers, if you're looking for a new detective series to get into, then this is probably a good one to go for. And then finally, I just want to mention a book that I haven't finished, but I'm about halfway through and I'm really enjoying it, and that is Grace and Fury by Tracy Banghart. I got this in the latest Fairy Loot box and it piqued my interest so much that I immediately abandoned the rest of my TBR for the month because it's just fantastic. It's a YA fantasy about two sisters who live in a world which has a very Italian-esque type theme to it, but in this setting women have no rights, so they're not allowed to read, they're not allowed to write, they're only allowed to work in menial jobs. They can't cut their hair unless they've been told to by a man, and so on and so on. And the two sisters are very different. We have Serena, who has been raised her whole life to be a Grace, which is someone who goes to live in the palace with the superior and is the epitome of everything a woman should be. She is submissive and delicate and gentle and womanly. And then we have another sister, Nomi, who is the direct opposite of that. She is hard, she is rebellious, she has secretly learnt to read, she doesn't understand why women aren't equal to men. And I'm not going to say too much more than that because right at the very beginning of this novel there is a huge twist which just sets the whole story off with a bang, but it is very fast paced. I am flying through it. I'm really enjoying it. There are a few classic YA tropes in this book, which I don't necessarily mind. There's nothing wrong with tropes if they're done well and if they don't take precedence over the story, and I don't feel like they are. I do think there is a big twist coming, which I have possibly guessed. But in terms of enjoyment factor, this is definitely going well for me, and I will talk more about it in my July wrap up, but I just wanted to mention it because it will be released in a couple of weeks, and if you like YA fantasy, if you like fast moving YA fantasy, then I definitely would suggest picking this one up. So there you go, they're the books that I read in the month of June. As I said, a mixed bag. Hopefully in July I'm going to have a slightly better reading month, but as always, thank you so much for watching. Do let me know what you read in the month of June. Let me know what your favourite book was. If you read any of the same books that I did, let me know what you thought. Please don't forget to give me the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all very soon.